Congratulations on the first debate of the year as the election 2024 is fast approaching. First of all, how do you rate the debate between President Biden and candidate Trump?
I would not give the entire debate very high marks. I thought there were a lot of issues, a lot of Donald Trump not answering questions and then having to have those repeated over and over again. I think Joe Biden did an excellent job, although he was off to a slow start. It took him a little while to find his pace and to find his ability to communicate answers that were responsive to the questions. But once he did, I think it was really clear who won this debate, and I think it was Joe Biden, because the messages couldn't be more different. We have someone who cares about people and cares about democracy and cares about making sure that this country has fairness in not only its elections, but in its economy, and that there's justice in our environment, in our social programs, that everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed. And then we have someone on the other side who wants to eliminate women's rights, who wants to make sure that immigration just ends completely, which would be disastrous for the country, who basically has embraced and coddled fascists and Nazis and has embraced a culture of hate. And for me, the choice has always been clear, but I'm hopeful that regardless of some bumps in the road, that the choice has become more clear to other people who viewed the debate.
Well, if you look at the way the polls are going, they are tilting towards Trump, to understand that a lot of people before this moment, they were thinking Trump was already like a foregone conclusion that he wasn't going to get this far. But from the look of things, Trump seems to have resurged. There seems to be a resurgence on Trump's popularity, and Biden's ratings are dismally low. What do you think is responsible for this?
So first, let me negate the premise, because ever since Trump's conviction, the polls have actually flipped, and Biden is now leading in the polls. But let's not trust polls, right? We've seen where that's gotten us in the past. People need to ignore the polls and get out and vote for the candidate that resonates with them. So I don't want to put stock in polls.
Okay. What are your thoughts on the present dispensation with regard to migration, with regard to some of the Biden issues, in New York here, which is regarded as a sanctuary state for migrants? There has been a lot of, sticking points, moving parts about, immigration, which seems to dominate, of course, foreign policy, like what is happening, overseas with regard to the Palestine and Israeli conflict. What are your thoughts on those, sticking issues, which seems to be a polarizing issue as well in the U.S.?
I do think that, especially if you watched tonight, Trump, every time there was a question about anything, pivoted back to the issue of immigrants and border security. And while every country does have a right to border security, and it is something that is important to the country, and we do need to make sure that we have, the lies that have been spread about what's going on at the border are greatly concerning. In particular, the criticism of Biden for what he can and cannot do with executive orders. Really, Congress is the one that needs to take action when it comes to any kind of border security. That's their role and their responsibility. The executive order, even though Biden did enact it because at the point where he was just exasperated and got tired of dealing with it, that's not the president's role. Asylum is a right, and that is an international right, and it is something that is determined by treaty, which is something that is determined by Congress, not the president. And that's how our country is. If you want to change that, you have to change the fundamental way the country operates. So Biden implemented this executive order, but there was a deal that came together in a bipartisan way, and I think Joe Biden did a really good job of explaining what some of those deal points were when he talked about the protections to make sure that when we do have people crossing the border, fentanyl is not coming across with them. That's important. But that doesn't mean we say no to people who are trying to come here legally through the asylum process either. We have to have a balance with that, in my opinion. And I think Joe Biden did a very good job of answering part of the question, and Donald Trump kept trying to pivot and lie, frankly lie, talking about the crime brought by migrants. The statistics will show you, and I think if you look at a Brennan Center report that was tweeted out today, they will show you that a lot of that is untrue. But they are trying to prey on fear. And while we do need to address crime, and we do need to make sure that we're not ignoring real issues, because there are some real issues, it's just, if you would think, if you listened to the other side, that you can't walk out of your door in New York City without being attacked. I actually had my cousin who lives in North Carolina call me last year and say, "Are you okay? Like, it sounds like it's so scary there. What's going on?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "There's so much crime." They're saying, like, and I was like, no, nothing has changed for me in my daily life. There's the hyperbole that has gone on with that is really just to shock people and make them fearful.
Okay. Finally, I know this one, as a Democrat, you may not be pleased to answer it, but it's one of the harshest critics that has come off from the Republicans about Biden's age and memory, issues. Do you think that's a factor, even though Trump is also like close to 80?
We live in a country where we have a two-party system, and our choice is binary. And is Joe Biden old? Yes. That is not a shock. And I think a 3-year difference, that's not a big difference. So we're not comparing two people where one is bright and shiny and new and one is really old. They're both older men, and both of them have shown some issues of stumbling when it comes to speaking. Joe Biden has been known to have a stutter for his entire life. I think sometimes people confuse that with having a cognitive deficiency, when that is not necessarily the case when it comes to the president. I think I am biased, I admit my bias, but I do think Donald Trump has shown more signs of cognitive deficiencies than Joe Biden has. And there's a really interesting podcast that I've been listening to called Shrinking Trump, which really has doctors analyzing a lot of the issues with him, and compares where Joe Biden is just normal aging, where Donald Trump is actually showing signs of dementia.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.